Welcome in. Special football 24/7 edition. Breaking news: Eagles Brandon Graham has officially announced his retirement from the NFL after 15 seasons, all of them wearing Eagles green. I'm joined now by John McMullen, who's live from the NovaCare complex, who was just in the room for the Brandon Graham retirement press conference. He took questions. He went on for about 40 minutes, and I'm sure there was a whole pre and post after that. So, Johnny Mac, welcome into the show, brother. Your first thoughts on Brandon Graham retiring and you being down there at the press conference today?
Yeah, I mean, one of the all-time great careers. Obviously, tried to hint at it this morning on Birds 365. Knew it was coming, but we couldn't quite talk about it. So, 15 years. For those who saw it, the two Lombardi trophies were brought up to be a sort of accentuate his retirement. If you think about him being a cornerstone, my question was about Nick Sirianni. He always says that every workplace needs a Brandon Graham, and what that kind of meant to him, and that was natural for him. So, this is going to be a difficult player to replace, not only on the field, where amazing at the level he played. He did confirm, by the way, our old friend Derek Gunn had reported it before. DG is very close to Brandon. He retore his triceps in the Super Bowl. So he did confirm that, but probably shouldn't have been playing in the game, but really wanted to come back. Knew the risks, as we talked about leading up to that game, and sure enough, he did re-tear it. But to be able to go out 15 seasons, no other Eagle has played 15 seasons, played the most game in Eagles history, and the final one is the second Lombardi trophy. He's a part of both of the Super Bowl teams. He made the biggest play, I would argue, certainly in modern franchise history, the strip sack of Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52. And he talked about it a little bit today. He was early in his career, he was quickly labeled a bust. He got picked 13th overall in 2010. Earl Thomas was picked 14th.
Yep.
Jason Pierre-Paul was picked 15th. And there were a lot of Eagles fans upset early in his career. And he turned that thing around. And that is rare in this town, especially. The passion of this town, let's be honest, they can grind people up when they don't perform well. And he was mentally strong enough to handle it. And I always laugh. I mean, Earl Thomas is going to the Hall of Fame. So, he was a great pick for the Seattle Seahawks. But, Brandon lasted longer. He lasted longer than JPP. Amazing, amazing career trajectory on the field. I think he's a borderline Hall of Fame player. He's probably not going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's certainly going to be in the Eagles Hall of Fame. But, I just think about when we used to have conference calls in the prime of his career. It used to be a weekly duty of opposing coaches to do conference calls. And every time it was an offensive head coach, they'd always talk about blocking 55 and 91, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. Those were the cores of this Eagles defense for such a long time. And Fletcher was back today. Jalen Hurts was here. Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman. People want to go to my Twitter feed. I posted some of the pictures with BG and everybody taking pictures with the Lombardi Trophy, his family, obviously his kids, his wife. Jalen's fiance was here. Lane Johnson was here. Some of the younger players, Thomas Booker, Jalix Hunt, Jeremiah Washburn, his position coach, and obviously Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. So, I had mentioned, I've known for a little while that Brandon was going to retire, and I've kind of mentioned that they wanted to do something like this, and they've done it in the past for Jason Kelsey and Fletcher, where they, not only have some of the teammates and Nick and some of the coaches and some of the current players, but they want to bring in family members and all that kind of stuff. So there's some logistics that you have to go through to get that together. So that's why it takes a little bit of time. But what a career! What are the great careers in Eagles history? Um, and I agree with Nick Sirianni, who basically said every workplace needs a Brandon Graham. I got to talk to his mother Tasha, who's like him and is so proud. I think she's more proud of how he's taken as a person by all of us in the media, because I've
As
been
she
doing
should.
this.
Yep.
I've been doing this for 25 years. I have never met a better person to cover than Brandon Graham. I mean, and he talked about it, and you have to stand up in times of adversity. Nobody wants to talk after losses. Nobody wants to um, talk after some difficult things, but it's part of your job. It's part of being a professional. And he always took that. And it's funny because I wasn't here in 2010, but evidently, and I still hear the story, Brandon Graham remains the only person to introduce himself to every member of the media in 2010. And before it started, he went to every single member of the media, gave him a hug or a dap or something before it started. So he came in that way, comes out that way. Rashad Penny's the only other player that did that since I've been covering the Eagles. And with Brandon, I mean, there's about 45 people here today. So a lot of people just you rarely see somebody who has that respect and is also, he's a great player, and you say, but he's, a better person. He's that type of guy.
He really is, John. I saw the video of him going and hugging all the members of the media that were there. Just class from start to finish, John McMullen. It perfectly personifies Brandon Graham. John, let's go to the on the field real quick. 15 years, John, from start to finish on one franchise for one team in one city. John, you don't see that with some of the best players to ever play this game. It's incredible that BG started and ended here. You're a guy, you mentioned you've been covering this league for 25 years. You just don't see that, Johnny Mack, and that shows you how special this guy is.
No, especially in this era, the free agency era.
Yep.
Maybe if you go back to the 70s where they didn't have free agency, you could keep teams together for long periods of time. But and he almost left. He almost went to the New York Giants when he first became a free agent. And you can imagine how that would have been taken. Um, and it always worked out. And then somewhere along the line, probably after Super Bowl 52, he crossed over this sort of mythical barrier where he became, such not only a foundational part of the organization, but a foundational part of the city. And I think it was always very important for the Eagles to make sure he finished his career in Philadelphia. Because the typical mentality, and we talk about it every day when we're talking about free agency, it's, all right, you get to be a certain age in this league, and it becomes a 1 year deal. And that 1 year deal was never a difficulty for the Eagles and Brandon Graham, because Brandon seemed to understand the the trajectory of an NFL player, and was willing to take a little bit less to play here. And the Eagles were aware that, all right, usually you want to move on, but there's never a bad idea to keep Brandon Graham around. And he one thing he said today is, if he wasn't able to make it back to the Super Bowl, he probably wouldn't be up here talking about the stage and the podium here at the NovaCare complex.
Right.
Meaning he would have came back for another year. And I believe that, because from the Eagles standpoint, we've been talking about the edge rushing, to have him around for another year. They don't have to pay him a lot of money. I think they would have brought him back. I really do, especially now when they don't have Josh Sweat. And, the leader of that room right now is Nolan Smith. off the field, it wouldn't be the worst thing to have another year of Brandon Graham. But I think winning another Super Bowl, perfect punctuation. I mean, we were joking. If they only won one, they probably wouldn't have brought up the Lombardi Trophy because it ruins the aesthetics of the picture. You need balance in the picture. So to get that was the perfect ending. And yeah, he's walking away as nobody has ever played more games as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles, and nobody's beaten that number anytime soon.
No doubt about it. John, I want to take you to something that sticks out to me from Brandon Graham's career. And I'm not going to go down the cliche of, the strip sack. It was my favorite play in Eagles history, the strip sack. Obviously, a big part of the reason we won our first Super Bowl. But a part of Brandon Graham's career that sticks out to me, and then maybe you can share one with us from your objective reporter perspective. Maybe it's an impressive part or something. But I go to that 2022 season, John. 2021, he tore his Achilles. He was 34 years old. People were talking about retirement even back then, coming off that Achilles tear. And he goes out and sets a career high in sacks in that 22 year with 11 sacks, and has maybe one of his best years ever at 34 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. I know that season had a lot of context to it, but I just think that moment is so Brandon Graham, where he perseveres, he pushes through. He overcomes the adversity or the odds, if you will. And I think that personifies him personally, but that's just something for me. Anything for you that stick out on Brandon Graham, John?
I've always said, and I always, every once in a while, I'll bring up his grades from PFF. It was always the consistency for me. I think he was the most, for a long time, I used to say, I had this argument with Seth because, me, I talked about it this morning. I don't care about sacks. I don't care. And the consistency that he did from week to week to week to week and year to year to year to year, he's basically a top 10 player for 12 consecutive years or something of that nature at his position. With the exception of that year, he did get injured. And the only reason he wasn't there that year is because he was injured. I mean, he is one of the great defensive linemen of his generation, but I don't think he gets the recognition he deserves. It's ironic. It's probably why one of the reasons I hate sacks is because nobody recognizes how good Brandon Graham is.
Right.
It's
Only one Pro Bowl, John, in his career. Crazy.
Yeah, I because it's all about numbers and
right.
And yet, if you talk to the coaches in that same period, it's like all they care about is blocking Brandon and Fletcher because they know they're going to wreck the game if they were playing the Eagles. And that's pretty much what happened for a long period of time. And then when he really started to click and he mentioned it today when Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz got here. He loved playing for Jim Schwartz. So did Fletcher. And that's when it really started clicking for him. Amazing that he could go as long as he did and still be underrated. And I still think he's underrated because he wasn't a great finisher. If there's one thing you can talk about his game, he wasn't a great finisher as a pass rusher, but boy, he was a pass rusher. But he did everything. He was two-way. He could defend and run. He could set the edge. He could put incredible pressure. And, in year 15, Jimmy Kempsky and I were talking about it before it started. Before he got hurt this time, he was their best edge rusher. He was their best edge rusher. Josh was playing well, but it wasn't Josh's best season. It's probably not as good as either 2022 or 2023. It was limited because the Eagles were very cognizant the last couple of years of keeping him on a pitch count. Although when Vic got here, he announced this was going to be his last year, and Vic said, "I'm going to play him." And if you think about how much he was actually playing more, it was counterintuitive because Vic said, "All right, this is the last year. He's so good, I'm going to play him." And he was playing at that level before November 24th is when he got injured against the Rams. He was their best edge rusher in year 15
It's
on what was
amazing,
the
John.
number one defense in the NFL, and he was impactful all the way to the end. And the fact that he was able to get back, obviously, he needed the help of his teammates to keep playing because you needed that time frame to get all the way to the Super Bowl. And to be able to get back and be a part of that, they didn't play a lot. I think he played 13 snaps. But just to get back and contribute and be part on the field of such a dominating performance, I think it was too perfect an ending for Brandon to revisit and try to come back.
Unbelievable, John. Any other tidbits you can give the people from inside the press conference today with Brandon Graham? I know you mentioned the hugs and stuff like that to the media contingency, but a lot of people love the inside, John, the inside look at the presser. Any more you can give us, or did you give us it all?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, Jalen was there, as I mentioned. Fletcher came back. Lane was there. A lot of younger guys. Nolan
I'm
Smith was
surprised
in the
Kelsey
back.
wasn't there, John. I saw BG or Fletch and Lane. I
Now,
thought
a
Kelsey would
little
be
bit
there.
of surprise, but Kelsey's big time now. Who knows? He might be in high. He might be
Yeah,
sometimes just logistics don't
yeah,
work out.
logistics, right?
He's got so much going on. But a lot of people were here. Players, coaches. I saw Bobby King and obviously Nick and Howie were in the front. Uh, Kevin Petullo was here. Thomas Booker, Jalix Hunt. Some of the younger players, as I mentioned, Nolan. And he was sure to sort of try to pass that torch to Nolan Smith. And he mentioned he passed it last year to Josh Sweat, and now it's got to go quickly to Nolan Smith in that edge room. Jeremiah Washburn, Big Dom, obviously, it made, but Brandon's, getting to talk to his mom after the press conference. Ed and I talked to her for a little bit, and you could see why he developed into the person he did, because she was not going to let him develop into somebody else. And the one thing about that defines Brandon Graham, and this is something I'm old and I'm still working on. And it's tough to be in this industry and not be cynical and all that kind of stuff. And you should be, from a standpoint of somebody who does my job. But when you're a player, it's completely different. And, he's always focused on the positive, because negative isn't going to get you anywhere. So it's a little bit different from a player's perspective. And that's why I always talk about they have to have, which I think a lot of fans don't understand, they have to have a different philosophy. They can't live and die with every moment, because they got to come back the next day and try to get better and try to win the next week. And he was the definition of positive, and that's why Nick said what he said, which was, every once in a while Nick will drop a gem, and that was a gem. I talked about his Adam Thielen gem this morning. Another one of his gems was every workplace needs a Brandon Graham. And now the Eagles workplace, for the first time in 16 years, will not have a Brandon Graham. He'll be around. He's going to, he mentioned he's going to have lunch with Jeffrey Lurie, and, he's going to try to help Jeremiah Washburn. But his mom said he's got a lot of offers to do other things back in Detroit, Michigan, University of Michigan. So we'll see what happens, but he's always going to be a part of this organization.
Johnny Mac, well done today, man. Great report. Great question down there for Brandon Graham. You can tell that, how good of a guy he is in those moments and those questions. But John, great stuff, man. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning on Birds 365. Just your final thoughts here as we wrap up this football 24/7. Brandon Graham hanging up the cleats, John. 15 years.
Yeah, nothing more to say. One of the all-time great Eagles. Nobody's ever played more games. Nobody's ever meant more to this organization. There's only 2 Lombardi trophies in this franchise history. He's a big part of both of them. And the biggest play in the Eagles' modern era. I don't think there's any doubt about it. for all the talk, the splashiness. I think that's in many ways that's apropos of Brandon Graham, because not the splashiest player from the stat standpoint, but more important. So if you think about Super Bowl 52, everybody goes to the Philly special. That's the most famous play, and it is. But the most important play, Brandon Graham.
Well done, Johnny Mac. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you in the morning on Birds 365.
All right, thanks everybody.
All right, there's John McMullen joining in here on a special 24 football 24/7 edition. Brandon Graham officially announces his retirement. Great takeaways there from Johnny Mac, beautifully stated by him. This is a big one, man. I put him on my Eagles Mount Rushmore, and I got one comment back. Why is he on your Mount Rushmore? I'm like, listen, to each his own. He's on my Mount Rushmore for the Philadelphia Eagles for sure. I love Brandon Graham, the player. He's a great guy. If you've ever met him behind the scenes, a better person than he is player, and that's hard to do because he's a great player. So no doubt about it. Appreciate all you guys checking in. Hit that like button. Drop your comments down below of your favorite Eagles Brandon Graham moment. What is your favorite moment? And for the sake of the comment, let me say outside of the strip sack, because I know everybody's going to go to the strip sack. So outside of the strip sack, your favorite Brandon Graham moment. Comment on the video down below. Thank you all for watching and listening, subscribing, sharing. We'll catch you next time on JAKIB Sports.